Hi, I'm Femi Oke.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
Today, amid the Gulf's diplomatic crisis, a call to shut down Al Jazeera.
What does the demand say about free speech in the Middle East?
It's been more than a month since Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain and Egypt cut ties with Qatar and accused it of supporting what they call terrorism, an allegation Doha rejects. For political and economic ties to resume, the group had issued a series of demands, and one of those was the closure of Al Jazeera.
Well, since early June, Al Jazeera offices in Riyadh and Amman have been closed. Al Jazeera websites have also been blocked in several countries. Leading up to the anti-Qatar blockade, one Twitter user in Dubai wrote, "It's been a week. Your app and website both are down and not working here. Reason?" In recent months, Qatari-owned news websites have been under threat. Fake content briefly posted on the website of Qatar's state news agency contributed to tensions between the country and the Saudi Arabia-led group of nations. On June 8th, Al Jazeera's online platforms were targeted in a series of attacks by hackers. About a week later, the Twitter account for Al Jazeera Arabic was briefly suspended following a storm attack of account reports to Twitter. On June 23rd, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Bahrain, and the UAE issued 13 demands and now 6 principles to end the standoff. Qatar has refused to comply with any of the terms, one of which included shutting down the Al Jazeera media network. Qatar says the demands are an attack on its sovereignty. Now, Mark in the U.S. tweets, "This isn't about Qatar as much as the global attack on the media. Somebody doesn't like what Al Jazeera uncovers." Well, Julian in the UK writes, "The Saudis demand Al Jazeera is closed and nobody says a word." Qatari-owned Al Jazeera began in 1996 and was the first pan-Arab news channel in a region dominated by tightly controlled state media. Its sister channel, Al Jazeera English, started broadcasting in 2006. Now, around the world, people shared their opinions on the importance of a free press in the Middle East and beyond. Duncan in Kenya writes, "Al Jazeera is one of the most credible media orgs globally. Demand press freedom." From Kenneth Roth of the group Human Rights Watch, "No surprise that a bunch of monarchs and autocrats want to silence a network that gives the public a voice." And one supportive message for the network even came in the form of song from Jim Tur in New Mexico.
"I'm singing the Qatar guitar blues, and they're trying to kill Al Jazeera News. When Saudi's asking for a fight, you must be doing something right."
And Karen Williams says, "If Al Jazeera is booted out as part of a deal, let's hope that they find a home elsewhere. Likely won't be in the Middle East. They really shook it up."
So I'm going to be really honest here. This is a very uncomfortable show for me in particular to do as a member of Al Jazeera, talking about ourselves and our own journalism and being in the headlines. So I'm going to say that very candidly. But hopefully our guests will help us do that and have a little bit more distance than I'm able to bring to the conversation. With us to talk about free press issues, we have in Paris, Alexandra El-Khazan. She is head of the Middle East desk with Reporters Without Borders. From The Hague in the Netherlands, Sam Cherebi. He is Senior Lecturer of Middle Eastern Studies and Economics at Emory University. He's also the author of Fridays of Rage, Al Jazeera, The Arab Spring, and Political Islam. Alexandra, Sam, good to have you here. Alexandra, let's just sort of look at the Middle East landscape as far as media is concerned. If you go around the region, what does press freedom look like?
Well, in fact, sadly, I mean, the Middle East is the most difficult region for journalists, whether it is because of the war zones or because of political instability and corruption. So the region is known for its hotspots and conflicts, but also for its repressive regime that aim to control the information and in order to hold on to power and protect their image. So really, I mean, the region has a bad record of a free speech and freedom of information. There's a lack of media independence, and this is why media outlets and journalists often are used or seen as political tools, and this is the case for Al Jazeera. So most of the time, journalists in this region, they practice self-censorship in order to avoid problems.
Alexandra, do you want to give us an example?
Yeah.
Because this is your region, this is your patch, you know it really, really well. Give an example of self-censorship in the Middle East?
So, for instance, even in the Gulf region, to be more specific, journalists know they can be targeted if ever they dare to criticize the ruling family, the ruling power, religion, or even the established order. They know or even morality. They know they risk years of prison just for this, for tweets, for expressing their views, anything that is seen as being dissident and too audacious, I mean,
Sure.
for the power, yeah.
So where does Al Jazeera fit into this mix where there is some self-censorship within the media around the Middle East?
It's a good question, actually. Al Jazeera, you could say, is the only media outlet broadcasting from the Arab world that rose actually to the position of being the watchdog of democracy and seen as, you could say, a respected media outlet in the West. And all the other media are controlled by states. Al Jazeera, even if it is a state-owned, if you could say, outlet, it has a huge margin of freedom. It has been the nursery of the Arab, if you could say, Arab Spring, Arab revolutions, and an anti-establishment message. In that sense, you could say that's why it became the target of arrows and slings of the whole region, because it has been seen as a matchbox. This is what Mubarak said. This is what many other Arab leaders said, because it has been really helping free speech and promoting actually, the voice of the voiceless, especially against corruption, against the establishment, and a number of things. In that sense, Al Jazeera is a huge success story at the global scale.
So Sam, I'm going to read a comment from someone online who would disagree with you. This is a comment that I actually got on one of my own personal Instagram posts just a few days ago when I wrote "Demand Press Freedom." Sarah writes in, "Everyone is entitled to their opinion, but Al Jazeera has been exposed and they look really bad right now. Some channels may broadcast incorrect information and make mistakes. We're all human, but to spread blatant lies to help them with their own plots and plans and cause corruption, that's not acceptable." So that's one of the views. And of course, she's not alone. There's several people who hold that view. But we actually got a video comment from someone who is the Deputy Program Director of Human Rights Watch with a different take on this. And he says whether or not you like what you see on Al Jazeera, shutting it down leads to something else. Have a listen.
The demands that Qatar close down the popular TV network Al Jazeera simply underline what we've known already for a long time, namely that authoritarian governments don't like being criticized and they don't like freedom of expression in general. In the Middle East, especially since the Arab Spring, when people across the region took to the streets and social media to do exactly that, to criticize their governments, governments have responded with increased repression. And so you don't need to agree with everything that Al Jazeera says to see that efforts to silence it are part of a broader effort to crack down on freedom of expression and dissent across the Middle East.
So Alexandra, have you seen anything like this before, a call to shut down a complete network?
So this is really quite unprecedented in the region, at least. So you have like these 4 countries allying to put pressure on Qatar and demand the shutting down of, as you said, it's one of the most, the biggest, the most watched media channel in the region and the most influential. For us, I mean, the way we see it is just that it's unacceptable because of what it entails. I mean, it opens doors to more restriction on journalism, more censorship, and more censorship in general in the region, and that's really unacceptable. We see it as a serious attack on freedom of the press and media pluralism in the region, and also on the people's right to access information. I mean, media outlets have the right to exist without being forced to adapt to the neighboring countries' policies. I mean, this is really unprecedented and really absurd demand to shut down the media.
Sam, I'm going to show our audience 2 pages. One is the website for Al Jazeera English, which is here, right here, aljazeera.com/news/ as if you didn't already know that. And then this is Al Jazeera Arabic. I've translated it into English so you can see what the headlines are. There is a difference between the 2 channels. What is the difference? And do you think that is part of the call for the closure?
Of course. If I may say, Al Jazeera Arabic is a total different animal. It positioned itself for the last 20 years, and that's why Qatar is paying actually the price for Al Jazeera as the watchdog of democracy, but at the same time, it was critical about the regimes, it was critical about corruption, but also at times it promoted a certain agenda. But sometimes you could say it worked as a super PAC for such some political parties like Ennahda in Tunisia or something like that. But you could say the same thing about Fox News. Fox News was a super PAC actually for the Republican Party. There is nothing wrong with that. It's not a reason to shut it down. It's part of the media landscape, and every news outlet, media outlet, hides by showing and shows by hiding. And that's why you have social scientists that study media effects and study framing and priming and agenda setting, and this is part of the whole media system.
So Sam, a question here from Wise One on Twitter, that's his handle. He says, I'm wondering if U.S. President Donald Trump's recent visit, made this a condition of the arms sale before he left the Middle East. Is this a test run of more things to come? What do you think is behind this? And he's, of course, referencing Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia not too long ago.
Yeah, I think that these countries was emboldened actually by the visit of President Trump. They were all touching this glowing orb, if you could say, and in order to come up with something really interesting to help the region, they wanted to close down Qatar because they see it's envy. Second, because they think Al Jazeera is problematic. It is a headache for the Arab world, and that's why they want to have a controlled environment. The only place where you can critique the Arab world is from London or from the West. Sky News does the same thing. Al Arabiya does the same thing, but they don't do it from Doha like Al Jazeera is doing, and that's the big difference actually. And I do think that Al Jazeera has been resilient since the Gulf War because it has been bombed actually in Al Jazeera in Baghdad. There was a lot of pressure on Al Jazeera by a number of Arab countries to close it down, or at least you could say that since 2014, Al Jazeera toned down a little bit its critique. And it closed down also the most popular show, Sharia Life, of Mufti Al-Qaradawi, of the global Mufti, they call him.
Do you feel that there has been some pressure on Al Jazeera over the years and Al Jazeera is changing?
Changed a little bit. You could say since 2014, it changed a little bit, yes.
All right. Alexandra and Sam, thank you for your analysis. Really appreciate it today. Take care.
To those who demand that Al Jazeera be shut down,
and that people's right to the truth be suppressed,
we too have demands.
We demand journalists be able to do their jobs
free from intimidation and threats.
نطالب أن يحفظ للناس حقهم في الوصول إلى المعلومة
دون انحياز ولا تدليس.
نطالب بإسماع صوت المهمشين والمنسيين في أصقاع العالم.
We demand diversity of thought and opinion be cherished,
not feared.
We demand journalists aren't treated as criminals.
We demand
press freedom.
So that was Al Jazeera's response to the call for its closure. For a much deeper look at this, we are joined by Abdurrahim Foukkara, Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief of Al Jazeera Arabic, and in Doha, Imad Musa, he's the head of online with Al Jazeera English. Gentlemen, welcome.
So, Abdurrahim, of course, we saw you in that video as one of the first faces. So I'm going to pose this tweet to you. And this is something that we've seen in various places online, a criticism. This is Blake Vincent. He says, I've just heard the argument that Al Jazeera Arabic has a different approach to some conflicts, stoking sectarian animosity. Honestly, I was hoping someone could clear that up for me. So clearly, he's asking in good faith, very innocently there. What do you say to criticisms like that?
Well, I say that obviously things are seen differently by different people. To him, Al Jazeera may stoke sectarian strife in the Middle East. To somebody else, they will look at the role of Al Jazeera differently. One thing we know for sure is that throughout its history, ever since its inception, Al Jazeera has been under attack. Another thing that we know is that various people have found a platform to express their agenda through Al Jazeera, whether they are from the region, from the United States, and elsewhere. This is a highly combustible part of the world. And I think we would be amiss as a news outlet if we didn't actually provide a platform for people to express their grievances, whatever those grievances may be. It just happens that in some parts of the Arab world, Iraq, Syria, some parts of the Gulf now, the sectarian issue has really exploded big on the radar. Al Jazeera does reflect that.
Imad, when I asked you specifically, let's talk real concrete examples. What is it that sometimes upsets people watching Al Jazeera around the world? You sent me this. This is from June. Arab World tweets, Hamas is resistance, not terrorism. And then you shared a whole conversation that's being shared online about Hamas. Tell us a little bit more about this story and why you think it's sometimes one of those things that really gets people riled up when they think about Al Jazeera.
I think what Al Jazeera provides, basically, it's an information provider. And the scary thing about information is that if you're the type of person or government that would rather not hear about what actual people are talking about at the street level, then you don't want to have an Al Jazeera and you don't want it to exist, or you don't want anything like it to exist. You don't even want people to tweet, to snap on Snapchat, to post anything on Facebook, because those kind of minor things can will wind you up in jail, most likely. So these are the kind of people that we're up against. The reason I picked that story per se is because it shows the value of Al Jazeera English specifically in the world. You can access a world of information in English that you most probably would not find anywhere else when you have places like Al Jazeera that are talking to the people on the ground at the street level. Abdurrahim was one of the people who coined this phrase during the second Iraq war, depending on how you count, in 2003, where most of the mainstream media will show you where missiles are taking off from, but who's going to show you where they land? Al Jazeera is always going to try to show you where they land at the street level. People who don't want to hear from the street, don't want to hear from their people, don't want to hear about anybody naysaying them or challenging them, will not support Al Jazeera. I believe Al Jazeera English and Arabic, they provide complementary and not exactly symmetrical services to the world, but they're both information services. So it just depends where these people, and if you look at the people that are asking for the shutdown of Al Jazeera, I mean, they are openly saying that we do not support freedom of speech, and we do not want freedom of speech in this region. So what you're witnessing, Femi, right now, and that's why they're kind of exciting times right now, is you're witnessing the battle for the soul of the Arab world. Will people be allowed to dream and talk and hope for a better future for their kids? Or are we going to live in authoritarian regimes for the rest of our lives? That's what we're witnessing right now.
Wanted to expand a little bit on something that Imad has said just now, but it was also said in your first segment, which is the difference between Al Jazeera English and Al Jazeera Arabic. There are obviously many different...
What's the biggest one?
I would say the biggest, most fundamental one is the audience. Because Al Jazeera, and you know, this is an obvious statement.
It's obvious, yes.
Yeah, but you really need to think about this. Al Jazeera Arabic's audience is mostly Middle East, North Africa, the Arab diasporas around the world. It broadcasts in Arabic. Al Jazeera's audience is worldwide. It cuts through many different time zones. It cuts through many different cultures and languages. And therefore, if you direct the broadcasting of Al Jazeera Arabic to the rest of the world, you will not get the reception that those broadcasts get in the Arab world, and vice versa. So Al Jazeera's programming is tailored to its specific audience with its specific history and its specific political realities. As I said, the Middle East is a highly combustible part of the world, and that finds itself reflected in the programming of Arabic. Al Jazeera English has a different purview, which is reflected in its own type of programming.
And then Despite that, despite them being different channels, of course, they are still under the same auspices. And this is what this tweet references. This is Akash, who says, Al Jazeera is a state-owned network too. It's bound to be biased in its reporting of events. So Imad, when you hear criticisms like this, how do you respond to them?
Listen, there is no ideal situation for almost any serious journalist in the whole world. Either there are commercial restraints, always there are ethical restraints. You as a journalist will never be able to cover everything that you would like to for one reason or another. Okay, so there's no utopia. Nobody's living in some utopia. What it is a struggle every day of your life, if you're a journalist worth their salt, to make sure you do the best job, the most accurate way, as fair as you can on a day-to-day basis. If Al Jazeera was, as some of the governments of these authoritarian regimes say, has zero credibility and spreads fake news, etc., etc., how could it have gained the audience and the credibility? Time is the best test. If, generally speaking, once a media organization passes the test of time, the people have decided that the consensus is that on balance, it is doing a good job, and every time they go back and use their own sources and fact check it, they find that actually, oh my goodness, they were on the right side of history. You remember in 2003, when I was working in Al Jazeera in Washington, we used to have demonstrations and used to get threats for providing a different perspective and fact-checking what the Bush administration was putting out at the time about mushroom clouds and yellow cake
even
in
to this
Niger,
to this day, there's no sign outside of our building saying where Al Jazeera happens to be, precisely because of the sensitivities of where in the world we cover. I asked Abdurrahim, you to bring us a clip. Tell us a reason why Al Jazeera is important. And you showed us an interview from 2011 that was a really incredible interview. Just give us a little bit of a setup. It's the former Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld. This is 2011, and
he basically had just published his new book, and we approached him, both Arabic and English, Al Jazeera Arabic and Al Jazeera English. Al Jazeera English at that time was represented by the late Frost.
Yes.
So basically he accepted to do the interview, and we decided to make it about the invasion of Iraq in 2003.
All right, and then this happened. Have a look, everybody.
We went back and forth with the commanders in Iraq and at CENTCOM, asking them, do they want additional forces? And the answer was no. And every time they wanted them, when it was yes, they were increased.
Okay, so does that make the numbers right? Does that make the numbers you went into Iraq with right?
Do you want to yell, or do you want to have an interview?
No,
you have a choice. You have a choice. You're being true to form.
No, but
yes, you are. No, say yes once. Just say yes once.
I'm asking you. Do you think that the numbers you went into Iraq, the numbers of U.S. troops that you went into Iraq with, did absolve you from the responsibility of tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqis killed by the coalition and those criminals that you talked about?
Now, are you going to stop?
Give me a straight answer.
Look, you can characterize my answers any way you want, and you do it in a pejorative way.
No, I'll do it respectfully.
No, you don't at all. You're obviously you are of that nature.
Ooh, I could watch so much more of that interview. On YouTube, it's called Rumsfeld in Heated Conversation with Al Jazeera. Why is that important? Why did you say, I want our audience to watch this in this particular show?
It's important because it's important because for Arabs in the Middle East, it's very important for them to know that I, an Arab journalist sitting in the United States, can press hard a former Secretary of Defense without suffering any consequences.
We could talk about ourselves all day long, but we're not going to. Thank you so much, Imad. Thank you, Abdurrahim, for being part of this conversation. This was a hard one to do. What is our online audience saying?
I think they are interested in seeing what's going to happen next.
As are we. Thank you very much. Our conversation continues online with the hashtag #DemandPressFreedom. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.